Once we can convert equivalent fractions, the next thing we need to be able to do is add and subtract fractions from each other. So let's start by looking at these circles here. If we divide each circle into half, then in the first circle, we'll shade in 2 halves, which is the same as 1 whole. And in the second circle, we'll shade 1 half. Let's add these halves together now. So 2 halves plus 1 half. Since we're working in halves, it's pretty easy to see how much we have in total, because we can just count the halves. We have 2 halves at the top and an extra 1 half, so we have 3 halves in total. And remembering our mixed numbers, because this is an improper fraction, we could also write that as 1 whole and a half. So 3 halves is the same as 1 1/2. So adding fractions is easy when the fractions already have the same denominator. Another example would be 4/5 plus 3/5. Since we're working in fifths, we can just add the numerators. So 4/5 plus another 3/5 gives us 7/5 in total. And again, we could draw that using some shapes. So we have 4/5 in the first one, and we're adding 3/5. And we can see we just need to add up the total number of fifths that we have to get to 7/5. But there's a problem if we have different denominators. So on our fraction wall here, we're going to use halves in the first row, but thirds in the second row. So on our first row, we'll shade in 1 half, and on the second row, 2/3. So since we have different fractions here, halves and thirds, it's hard to actually combine these together and work out how long our total is. We could try and move these up to here and say it's about this long, but we can't count exactly and work it out easily just by counting. So what mathematicians have worked out is we need to make sure the denominators are the same. And we can do this by using our similar fraction or equivalent fraction knowledge. So when the denominators aren't the same, when they aren't equal, we need to make the denominators the same. And let's do an example of that one. So here we will have 5/3, and we're adding 3/4. Straight away we can see the denominators aren't equal, so we can't just count and add 5 plus 3. So we need to work out what is a denominator that we can make the same. And this is called a common denominator. And the way that we can find the common denominator is, well, the easiest way is to multiply the two denominators together. So we have 5/3, so we multiply the 3 by the other denominator, times 4. And with our equivalent fractions, we know that what you do to one, you do to the other. So we also have to multiply the 5 by 4 as well. So that's going to give us 20, 3 times 4 is 12, 20/12. That's the same as 5/3. And how do we make quarters become twelfths? We're going to need to multiply by 3, which is the other denominator. And what we do to one, we do to the other. So we multiply the numerator by 3 as well. 3 3s are 9, 4 3s are 12. So 3 quarters is equivalent to 9 twelfths. And now we can finish that off because we're working in twelfths. So we have 20 twelfths plus 9 twelfths. That means we have 29 twelfths overall. The final thing we always check for though, and this is something we always do when we're working with fractions, is simplify. Whenever you find a fraction as your answer, always look to simplify. And remember, simplify means find an equivalent fraction that's smaller. And we do that by looking for any common factors. So 12 has some factors, 29, that's a prime number, so there's no factors. That means this is as simple as it can go. So that's the answer. Let's do another example, which is the one we did earlier. 1/2 plus 2/3 from our fraction wall. 1/2 plus 2/3. 1/2. So halves and thirds, the lowest common denominator is going to be 6 because 2 times 3 is 6. So to go from 2 to 6, we need to multiply by 3. What you do to one, you do to the other. And to go from thirds to sixths, we're going to need to multiply by 2 and the numerator by 2. So we have 3 sixths plus 4 sixths. And now we're in sixths, so we can add 3 sixths plus 4 sixths gives us 7 sixths overall. And again, simplify. But 7 is a prime number, so we can't simplify any further. We can't divide to find any smaller numbers. So that's the answer to that one. If we're subtracting, the rules are exactly the same. So 8/5 take away 3/5. Since we have the same denominator, we can just do 8 take away 3. Because we have our 8/5 and we're taking away 3 of them, so we have 5/5 left over. And we know that 5/5, if we're picturing the size of that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's the same as 1 whole. So that's simplified there. And another example would be 7 quarters take away 2/3. So just like when we're adding, we need to make a common denominator, the lowest common denominator. And again, we need to multiply, or the easiest way to do that is to multiply by the other denominator. By 3 and by 3, by 4 and by 4. So we have 21 twelfths take away 8 twelfths. So the answer to this one is taking away 8 from 21 twelfths. So we're left with 13 twelfths.